Big defenses. We're going to talk a little bit today in this video about adaptive or specific defenses, or what we commonly refer to as immunity. We're going to look at this over a couple of videos. So in this video, in part one, we're going to look specifically at the role of T cells in immunity. So immunity is defined as resistance to a particular pathogen or their toxins or their metabolic byproducts. In other words, they can't make you ill or make you sick or cause disease. It's based on the ability of our immune system to distinguish self from non-self. In other words, our immune system can recognize our cells based on certain markers and recognize non-self or foreign cells or foreign substances because they don't have the correct markers, and that tells the immune system that that's something is potentially harmful, it doesn't belong in our body, and that we should respond to it. So antigens are things that can elicit or can cause an immune response, cause our immune system to make the cells and make the chemicals to fight off that particular pathogen. So what is an antigen? Like I said earlier, antigens are molecules that can elicit an immune response. They are generally proteins because proteins have complex shapes and make it easier to distinguish one from another. They can be polysaccharides, which are large sugar molecules. They can be a mixture of sugar and protein called a glycoprotein, or they can be a mixture of sugar and fats called a glycolipid. The more effective antigens are large and complex in their structure and their shape. Haptens are smaller molecules that by themselves cannot cause an immune response, but when you combine them with other things, they can cause an immune response. So where do the cells involved in specific defenses come from? The lymphocytes. So as we know, lymphocytes, like most blood cells, are made in the red bone marrow. But they can also be formed in other places, like the T cells can oftentimes be made in the thymus, and we talked about the role of the thymus and thymosin in causing those T cells to become mature, become active, and able to fight infections. In the lymph nodes, we have T cells and B cells that are also being produced that help filter the lymph as well. So T cells are the most common type of lymphocyte. 70 to 80% of your lymphocytes are T cells. And they do various things. They secrete chemicals called lymphokines, which have a variety of functions. They help to activate your T cells, cause T cell proliferation, or cause your body to make more T cells to help fight the infection. They can activate a specific kind of T cell called a cytotoxic T cell that can actually directly attack and destroy foreign cells and substances. They can cause general white blood cell or leukocyte production. They can cause your B cells to mature. We'll talk more about B cells in the next video. Activate macrophages, which are the phagocytic cells that engulf foreign substances. They can also secrete toxins that can kill cells, foreign cells, secrete growth inhibiting factors that can slow down the growth of pathogens. T cells can also secrete interferon, which slows down virus reproduction. And they're responsible for what we call the cellular immune response, where cells are specifically attacking and destroying or inactivating foreign cells or toxins or metabolic byproducts. B cells are about 20 to 30% of your lymphocytes. They play a role in what we call the humoral immune response, or the chemical immune response. B cells themselves don't directly attack and destroy foreign substances. They differentiate into plasma cells, which then can produce antibodies, chemicals that can inactivate, can neutralize, can destroy foreign cells, foreign substances, toxins, and so on. So table 16.5 compares the T cells and the B cells as far as where they're made, where they differentiate, where they mature, where they're found in the body, and their primary functions. And I would encourage you guys to look at that as you read through chapter 16. So let's talk about T cells and their role in the cellular immune response. So they require an antigen-presenting cell in order for T cells to be activated and start their job as fighting off the infection. They also require what's called an MHC, or major histocompatibility antigen. These are those proteins that tell your immune system that a cell belongs to you. So that antigen-presenting cell will have the MHC antigens, but will also show your immune system the foreign antigens that it needs to respond to. So there are different kinds of T cells. There are the helper T cells. These are the ones that cause B cells to produce antibodies, as well as basically help the rest of your immune system work well. There's a specific type of helper T cell called a CD4 helper T cells that are specifically targeted by the HIV virus, which leads to AIDS by weakening the immune system by killing off most of these helper T cells. There are the cytotoxic T cells, or killer T cells, that attack and destroy cancer cells as well as virally infected cells in your body, slow down the spread of the virus. And then there are the memory T cells. These are the ones that provide long-term protection, so that if you get exposed to the same thing some other time in the future, you already know how to fight it off, and you can respond to it much more quickly, and you don't get the symptoms of that. That's why you don't get things like chickenpox more than once, because your body has made these memory cells, and so it knows what that virus looks like. It can respond much more quickly, and you don't actually exhibit the symptoms. Memory cells are why vaccines work, and we'll talk more about vaccines at a later point. So these next couple of slides talk a little bit about how do these T cells and B cells get activated. So in this case, we have a white blood cell that has engulfed a foreign cell there in step 1 and has taken the antigens, the proteins from the surface of the pathogen, and presented them on its surface so that the T cells and the B cells can recognize those, become activated, and start doing the things that they need to do to fight the infection.